Imagine spending, I don't know, $10 million to build the world's most advanced, heavily armored combat vehicle, right? And then you just watch it get permanently disabled by a $500 piece of plastic.
Right, a plastic drone.
Exactly, just something controlled by a teenager with a laptop. I mean, that terrifying math is basically what's keeping European defense ministers awake right now, here in May 2026.
It really is. It's a complete nightmare for legacy planners.
Yeah, because if you look at global defense news, it's usually just this impenetrable wall of procurement cycles and, geopolitical posturing. But beneath all that noise, the fundamental math of warfare is being rewritten.
Completely rewritten. And an entire continent is scrambling to adapt to it.
Which is exactly the core focus of our deep dive today. We are unpacking what analysts are calling the European defense supercycle.
It's a massive shift.
It is. We're going to look at what it is, why it's accelerating right at this very moment, and how it's fundamentally rewiring how Europe thinks about its own security, its industrial base, and, well, its entire future.
And to do that, we are pulling from a really comprehensive stack of recent market analyses, defense sector reports, and institutional investment trends from this quarter.
Right.
So our mission today is to trace the sudden push for European sovereignty and to understand its ripple effects across the global economy.
But before we get into the billions of euros changing hands, I do need to cover a little bit of housekeeping. So take a deep breath. Here comes the legal disclaimer.
Here we go.
Just a quick heads up before we jump in. This deep dive is strictly for informational purposes, just to feed your curiosity. It is absolutely not financial or investment advice, so you can feel free to put your wallets away.
Definitely keep them away.
Yeah. Also, if you enjoy decoding these complex global shifts with us, please hit that subscribe button to the channel so you never miss a deep dive.
All right, so set the timeline for us. How did the supercycle jump from an abstract theory into a very, very urgent reality?
Well, the primary catalyst dropped just a few days ago, actually, on May 10th, 2026.
The Pentagon made this official announcement that the United States is withdrawing 5,000 U.S. troops from Germany.
Which, 5,000 troops might not sound like a huge number in the grand scheme of a global military, but in terms of logistics and signaling, it's profound.
Profound is definitely the right word. In policy circles, this move is being categorized as a managed retrenchment.
Managed retrenchment, okay.
Yeah, and you'll also see it referred to in a lot of the source material as the Trump effect. Now, what's crucial for us to focus on here isn't the underlying politics of Washington. We're just looking impartially at the immediate market and policy reaction in Europe.
Right, exactly. We're not taking sides here, just reporting the market reality.
Exactly, and this announcement acted as a starting gun. Almost immediately, you had German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius issuing this very clear public mandate. He stated that Europeans must take more responsibility for their own security.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because I want to make sure we're conceptualizing this right. It's almost like having a big sibling who always stood behind you on the playground, right?
Right, yeah.
And suddenly they announce they're changing schools.
Yeah.
You suddenly realize you need to hit the gym, like today, fast. But why did this specific withdrawal trigger such an industrial panic compared to, past political rhetoric?
Because it transitions the conversation from theoretical to operational. For decades, Europe's security architecture relied so heavily on the protective umbrella of the U.S. military presence.
Sure.
And that's not just the troops. It's the logistical frameworks, the intelligence sharing, the sheer deterrence value. So when that umbrella visibly begins to retract, European nations can't just talk about sovereignty anymore.
They actually have to buy things.
Yes.
Yes.
They are forced to accelerate domestic procurement. They have to shift aggressively toward continental industrial self-reliance.
Meaning they have to start buying and building their own heavy hardware?
Precisely. And this policy shift is the long-term engine for what the industry calls national champions.
National champions.
Yeah, these are the predominant domestically headquartered defense contractors within Europe. And they are now being tasked with scaling up production to levels we literally haven't seen since the Cold War.
Which brings us to the natural next question, right?
Yes.
If Europe has realized it needs to hit the gym and become industrially self-reliant, who are they writing these massive checks to? Because the source material points overwhelmingly to Germany's Rheinmetall.
Oh, absolutely. Rheinmetall is currently the standout performer in the European defense space. They are having a defining quarter.
Yeah, looks like it.
It's characterized by these staggering contract volumes that are locking in their revenue for years to come.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Let's look at this late April 2026 contract. Rheinmetall secured an agreement worth 1.04 billion euros, which is roughly 1.2 billion US dollars.
Right.
And it is for a system known as IDZES. For you listening, that stands for Infantrymen of the Future Extended System. Yes.
Now, I have to say, €1 billion for infantry soldier of the future, that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. I mean, are we talking robotic exoskeletons here or just really expensive boots?
Well, it's a valid skepticism for sure, but this contract represents a shift from conceptual science fiction to practical digital integration.
Oh.
The goal of the IDZES program isn't to build Iron Man suits or robotic exoskeletons. It's about turning the individual foot soldier into a highly networked sensor node.
A sensor node. Walk me through what that actually looks like on the ground.
Sure. So imagine a conventional infantry squad, right? Historically, communication is bottlenecked by radio operators and physical line of sight. You have to physically see the target and call it in.
Like on a walkie-talkie.
Basically, yeah. But with this extended system, you're integrating advanced communication arrays, augmented reality optics, and command and control networks directly into the standard tactical gear. Every soldier is continually transmitting and receiving telemetry. They're perfectly synced with aerial drones, armored vehicles, and rear echelon headquarters in real time.
That's wild. So if one soldier spots something,
Exactly. If one soldier spots a target, that coordinate is instantly shared across the entire digital ecosystem. It allows artillery or air support to engage without that lengthy, error-prone radio relay.
so you're basically creating a unified high-speed mesh network out of human beings. That definitely explains the price tag.
It does. And, that digital integration is only one piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
Rheinmetall is also really expanding its regional footprint in the heavy armor space.
Right, the tanks and vehicles.
Yeah, for instance, Romania just selected Rheinmetall's Lynx combat vehicle for a $4 billion acquisition.
Wait, $4 billion for combat vehicles in a single country. I mean, Romania borders Ukraine and the Black Sea, so that acquisition clearly speaks to a very urgent need for border hardening.
That geographical context is essential. But perhaps the most historically significant development we saw in the source material is this new joint venture that was just formalized between Italy's Leonardo and Rheinmetall.
Oh yeah, the tank deal.
Right. They are collaborating to develop the next generation of main battle tanks for the Italian army.
I want to pause on that because that feels like a massive breakthrough. Historically, European nations have been incredibly protective of their own national defense industries.
Oh, fiercely protective.
Yeah, like France wanted to buy French tanks, Germany wanted to buy German tanks, and the result was this highly fragmented, inefficient patchwork of technologies.
None of which could easily communicate or share spare parts.
Exactly. So a joint venture of this scale suggests they are finally willing to share intellectual property.
That is the core insight right there. The sheer cost and complexity of modern warfare are finally overriding traditional national pride. To build a truly unified European defense base, these historic competitors have to collaborate.
They don't have a choice.
No. And it makes sense. Leonardo brings incredible upside in defense electronics and advanced sensor suites, while Rheinmetall brings unmatched expertise in heavy metallurgy and land systems. So by combining forces, they are attempting to build a standardized, sovereign industrial base.
And the financial result of all this integration is that Rheinmetall is sitting on order backlogs extending all the way out to 2030.
Yes, 2030.
But I have to push back here a little bit. A backlog to 2030 looks great on a spreadsheet, sure. But if we factor in the raw material shortages and the supply chain friction we're seeing globally, how many of those vehicles are actually going to be delivered on time and on budget?
And you've just hit on the critical vulnerability of the entire supercycle. A backlog is only as good as the factory's capacity to actually execute it.
Right.
And right now, these companies are trying to scale up production lines that have basically been dormant or operating at minimum capacity for 20 years. They face huge shortages in skilled labor, precision components, raw materials, all of it.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the major plot twist in the source material.
The drone twists.
Yes. Just as Europe commits billions to heavy armor and these traditional land systems, a fundamental contradiction emerges. In mid-April 2026, right in the middle of this spending spree, investor sentiment took a sharp, sudden pivot.
Yeah, analysts began conducting what they called a valuation reassessment.
Which is a polite way of saying they panicked.
Basically, yeah. The market started looking objectively at the modern battlefield, particularly in Eastern Europe, and realized that Low-cost, highly agile drone technology is effectively neutralizing traditional kinetic advantages.
So going back to our opening thought, it feels like spending a fortune building the world's most impenetrable physical bank vault, only to realize the bank robbers are all teenagers with laptops. You are pouring billions into defending against the wrong threat.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is the tension between legacy procurement and asymmetric drone warfare. It's causing severe market anxiety. The reality is that multi-decade big iron programs are inherently slow.
Right, they take forever.
It takes years to design, test, and deploy a new tank. Meanwhile, commercial drone technology evolves on a timeline measured in months. And because of this stark realization in mid-April, traditional European defense stocks actually experienced a noticeable slide.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive when you consider they literally just signed billions in contracts.
It seems backwards until you view it through the lens of long-term viability. Institutional investors are asking a very dangerous question. What happens to a 5-year backlog if military doctrine suddenly determines that heavy manned tanks are just obsolete?
Because they're just big targets.
Right. If a swarm of disposable drones can overwhelm a column of armor, that armor becomes a liability rather than an asset. So the smart money began looking for strategic hedges against the big iron.
They're pivoting toward companies that offer a different kind of shield. And the two names that dominate this pivot in the reports are Saab, along with defense electronics specialists like Thales and Hensoldt.
Saab is particularly interesting in this context. I mean, they've shown 28% year-to-date growth in 2026.
Wow, 28%.
Yeah. Investors view them as a leaner, more agile alternative to the traditional heavy industry giants. They focus heavily on sovereign sensors, advanced radar systems, and smart munitions that integrate really well into flexible doctrines.
But the real shift seems to be toward companies like Hensoldt. They are a smaller German player compared to Rheinmetall, but they are hyper-focused on electronic warfare. Tell us how that actually functions as a strategic hedge against drones.
Well, if you cannot reliably shoot down a swarm of 100 autonomous drones using traditional kinetic weapons like, bullets or missiles, you have to change the physics of the engagement entirely.
Yeah.
Hensoldt specializes in systems that attack the drone's electronic nervous system.
Oh, so instead of a kinetic shield, you were deploying like a radio frequency dome.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it, yeah. Their technology focuses on signal jamming, GPS spoofing, and essentially severing the telemetry link between the drone and its operator or its navigational satellites.
So it just goes blind.
Exactly. By flooding the operational airspace with targeted electromagnetic interference, they can cause a drone swarm to just drop out of the sky or return to base without firing a single shot.
That completely explains why defense electronics are suddenly the darling of the sector. The tank is useless if it doesn't have an invisible electronic umbrella protecting it from above.
And providing that umbrella is becoming just as lucrative as building the tank itself. Companies like Thales and Hensoldt represent the critical modernization of military value. It's no longer just about the thickness of your armor.
Right.
It's about the sophistication of your electromagnetic spectrum dominance.
Okay, so we've covered the traditional kinetic hardware, the big iron.
Uh-huh.
And we've examined the asymmetric drone threat forcing this pivot toward electronic warfare.
Yeah.
But the source material also zooms out to analyze the broader economic ecosystem tying it all together.
Right, because none of this happens in a vacuum.
Exactly. Neither the tanks nor the drone jammers can be built out of thin air. There are hidden wildcards driving this cycle, and some very real severe risks threatening to derail it entirely. Let's start with the wildcards.
Well, the most prominent wildcard identified in the market analysis is Rolls-Royce.
Now wait, why does a European defense supercycle, triggered by a U.S. troop withdrawal from Germany, suddenly benefit a British company that's most famous for, luxury cars and aircraft engines? The logical bridge isn't immediately obvious.
It's true, they are often overlooked in traditional land warfare discussions, but Rolls-Royce has rallied 11% so far in 2026. The key is their monopolistic hold on domains with impossibly high barriers to entry.
Okay.
Specifically, they're absolutely critical for nuclear submarine propulsion systems and next-generation fighter jet engines.
Ah, so this ties back to maritime sovereignty. If Europe can no longer assume the U.S. Navy will indefinitely secure its sea lanes and coastal waters, the ability to independently deploy nuclear-powered submarines becomes paramount.
That is the core issue. Developing a safe, reliable nuclear propulsion system from scratch takes decades and hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, you can't just spin that up overnight.
Not at all. Rolls-Royce already possesses that institutional knowledge and the manufacturing infrastructure. So as European nations look to project power and protect their maritime borders, companies with those ultra-specialized capabilities become incredibly valuable.
The sources also highlight BAE Systems as a wild card. Now, you might assume that with Europe trying to build its own sovereign supply chains, a company that is heavily tied to U.S. defense contracts might actually suffer.
You might think so, yeah. But BAE Systems actually operates as the vital bridge between American and European defense technology.
Oh, I see.
Despite the push for European autonomy, full decoupling from U.S. tech is virtually impossible in the near term. BAE is benefiting from global war risk rallies because their deep integration across both sides of the Atlantic makes them an indispensable partner. They're essential for complex joint operations and technology transfers.
Okay, so those are the hidden engines of the cycle. Let's talk about the brakes. Because right now, Europe's ability to actually manufacture these technologies is under severe threat. The reports highlight two major friction points: trade tariffs and supply chain friendshoring.
Two very big headaches.
Let's start with the tariffs. The sources cite proposed 25% U.S. tariffs on EU-produced cars, which were announced in May 2026. So what does this all mean? How do proposed tariffs on a European passenger hatchback car suddenly threaten the production of a multi-million-dollar combat vehicle?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is all about industrial crossovers. The heavy defense industry does not operate in an isolated vacuum. It relies on the exact same foundational supply chains as the commercial automotive sector.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Germany, for example, is powered by the Mittelstand, this vast network of mid-sized manufacturing companies that produce highly specialized components.
Okay, so it's like realizing that both a high-end combat vehicle and a commercial Volkswagen hatchback rely on the exact same precision ball bearings or wiring harnesses or microchips.
Precisely. So if a 25% tariff hits the European car industry, export volumes plummet. Automotive factories slow down production and they stop ordering those precision components.
Oh.
And if the component supplier loses their main commercial revenue stream, they might go bankrupt, or they have to drastically raise their prices just to keep the lights on.
And suddenly, the tank factory down the road, which relies on that exact same supplier for its ball bearings, is either paying double for the parts or dealing with a bankrupt vendor.
Exactly. The ecosystem is totally intertwined. It creates an immediate bottleneck. The defense sector cannot sustain the underlying industrial base on its own. It desperately needs the sheer volume of the commercial sector to keep component costs manageable.
Which leads us directly into the second major risk, friendshoring. We hear this term thrown around in economic circles constantly.
All the time.
Right. The idea is that you move your critical supply chains out of potentially hostile countries and relocate them to friendly neighboring nations or bring them entirely back within your own borders. And on paper, for a continent trying to build sovereign resilience, that sounds incredibly smart.
And geopolitically, it is the only viable path forward. You really cannot rely on a strategic rival to refine the rare earth metals that guide your missiles or to manufacture the semiconductor chips that run your command networks.
No, obviously not.
But the irony of friendshoring is the staggering financial and temporal cost of executing it.
Break down that friction for us. Why is it so hard to just build things locally?
Well, because the globalized supply chain was optimized over 40 years for one specific metric: maximum cost efficiency. It relied on just-in-time delivery from regions with the cheapest labor and the most relaxed regulations. So when you try to unwind that model, you hit a wall of logistical reality. Friendshoring doesn't just mean buying from a local vendor. It means you have to spend 5 years and billions of euros just getting the environmental and zoning permits to build a new steel forge in your own backyard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's long before you can even pour the first sheet of metal for the tank.
So even though Rheinmetall has a $4 billion contract, if the cost to manufacture those vehicles skyrockets because they have to reconstruct an entire local supply chain from scratch, their profit margins just evaporate.
Yes.
Their ability to deliver the hardware on time is severely jeopardized.
The supercycle is undeniably real and the capital is flowing. But executing on those massive backlogs in a rapidly deglobalizing world is proving to be a monumental challenge. Higher labor costs, strict European environmental regulations, and just the sheer time required to build new infrastructure are creating severe margin pressure across the entire sector.
This has been an incredibly revealing journey through the mechanics of global security. Let's synthesize the through line of what we've uncovered for you today. We started with a tangible geopolitical shock. The U.S. troop withdrawal from Germany in May 2026,
The catalyst.
right, which acted as the undeniable catalyst for Europe to prioritize its own industrial defense. That urgency triggered a massive boom for legacy big iron manufacturers, resulting in unprecedented billion-dollar contracts for advanced infantry networks and next-generation combat vehicles. It even forced historic competitors to share intellectual property.
But as we saw, that legacy boom is actively colliding with the realities of modern conflict. The rapid proliferation of cheap, asymmetric drone warfare is forcing a sudden valuation reassessment.
It's pushing the smart money to hedge their bets.
Exactly, hedging with companies pioneering electronic warfare and advanced sensor arrays.
And wrapping around all of this is the fragile economic ecosystem. These defense titans are racing to modernize while simultaneously navigating the collateral damage of commercial automotive tariffs and the agonizing expensive friction of rebuilding sovereign supply chains from the ground up.
It is a very precarious balancing act, and looking at all these converging factors leaves us with a rather profound question to consider as this supercycle matures.
Okay, what is it?
If a swarm of low-cost disposable drones can force the global markets to completely reevaluate multi-decade, billion-dollar armored vehicle programs, how will we define military power 10 years from now? Will the ultimate superpower of the future be the nation with the deepest, most resilient heavy steel factories, or will it be the nation with the most agile, innovative tech startups?
Wow, that is the perfect, unsettling thought to leave you with. It completely changes how you filter the daily headlines. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you enjoyed our exploration today, please do hit that subscribe button so you can join us for the next one. Until then, keep digging deeper and always keep questioning the headlines.